Thank you. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I trained in architecture, specializing in large-scale healthcare and working all over the world. So I have a vested interest in seeing that we can do things better and making sure that all this potential that we talk about actually gets realized in some fashion. So I'm going to go a little bit over, probably a little bit preaching to the choir, similar driving factors and things like that, but also how we're trying to turn that into scalable, actionable business practices within our company. So first we'll start with the stuff we all know. I think we understand the basics of moving to the left and the legacy of bad habits in our industry. Inefficiencies, getting off course early and paying the penalty in course correction, rework, lost time, all the usual things. I think we often don't talk about some of the more externally driven factors, things that are happening around us in our, kind of in the broader world that influence how we do our work. Okay, sorry. Construction productivity is not kept up with overall productivity. It's kind of embarrassing, actually, when you look at advances in sort of economic efficiency in other industries and what we haven't done, and how much we're really still carrying the legacy of the way we've done things for hundreds of years. We all know about losing our workforce and also how to harness the knowledge from that. Consolidation, I think we talk about often as a positive thing, but aggressive consolidation, aggressive focus often leaves huge gaps in between. And it leads people to sort of defend their tower as opposed to thinking about across the industry. Specialization is a similar trend. Risk versus liability is a little bit of a particular passion of mine because the construction industry historically and design have been oppositional. And the approach to risk was, it's not my problem, which is great. Some parts of the industry are really good at it, designers not so much. But what all of that did was nobody was actually trying to solve the problems. We were all just trying to distance ourselves from responsibility for the problems. And in order to have the wherewithal, the responsibility, the tools you need to solve the problems, you have to take on the risk. You have to engage in order to change. Lack of standardization, optimization, I think we all understand this, but really, really thinking about, while projects have unique characteristics, there is so much that is not unique. And we don't have to wait and think about that. And we habitually do. And we all talk about that we don't have to do that. And yet, the next project, we don't do that thing until almost the end. And then keeping up with the speed of change. Not just change for us in our industry, but for our clients, what's happening around us. We are not nimble. We could be better. We have all this tremendous information that we've talked about today and the ability to harness it and learn from it. But again, our ability to turn that dial and apply it to what we're doing has been limited. Just want to make one little pitch for our design partners here. There is a history of antagonism, but it comes from a real gap. As legally and professional responsibilities have consolidated around these silos, and technology and complexity of construction methodologies has increased, the distance between those things is increasing. And it's real information. And it's not, oh, I wish the designers would do a little bit more. Their professional responsibilities are clear. I wish the contractors would take more responsibility. Their professional responsibilities are clear, and there's space in between. So again, this is one of those areas where if we engage, we have more opportunity to change than just kind of the status quo. So we talk about what that actually means, where the problems are, what results. I think we all understand this in reality. And how do we get from that to more predictable outcomes? Having consistency, applying the principles that we can learn from what we see around us. Building buildings aren't the only things that get built in the world. Most of us have a highly specified piece of technology in our pockets or our hands that is built repeatedly. It's innovated, it's improved. It's different, but they're all still relying on certain similarities that we often don't exploit in construction. and leveraging our expertise. So kind of what are some of our steps along the journey? We started, DPR got started, but one of the core ethos things around DPR's starting was in being a general contractor, they still wanted to be builders. So self-perform work, actually performing construction, was always part of their approach. So the problems that we talk about weren't just theoretical, they're affecting the people who are actually out there building the work and part of DPR. We all have been, especially through CIFE, along the lean IPD journey. DPR were early adopters and proponents and actively sought out opportunities to kind of see how that influenced their experiences on projects. We had some successes. UCSF Mission Bay was one of ours. And looking back now, it's hard to even appreciate how impressive that was at the time. The scale on which things were done, you know, $1.5 billion, million square foot hospital project in California, delivered on budget and ahead of schedule. And it's sad, but that's hugely impressive for our industry. And it was groundbreaking at the time. We also invested in some of these technologies, the startups that we've talked about, how to take ideas and foster them and venture into new areas of work. Digital building components was one component of that, beginning to really look at what prefabrication means and how we engage in that in a more active way. Parametric costing and design. The traditional design process, SD, DD, CDs, it's not actually very efficient. It is one of those legacies of how we've done it for a long time. And we have, again, at the beginning of our project, so much more information than we typically take account of. And we can start maybe turning that around a little bit more, thinking inside out rather than outside in. So what we've done with all of that, I'm just going to tackle through the lens of people, process, and tools. So starting with people. What do we need to make these one-off experiences repeatable, to allow us to do this as a company and as an organization? We need leaders to support it. They need to be bought in on the idea. They need to be strategically looking in this direction and seeing the value. We needed technical skills. Designers who understand how to do what they need to do, but are particularly passionate about the intersection between design and construction and understanding the overall arc. We needed translators, people who could live in each of those silos and really understand what it means to be in them and convey those experiences and perspectives to others. So what that meant for us is defining, clearly agreeing as a company that this is one of our strategic focuses. It's an area where we will invest, we will put resources, we will put time, and we will look for project opportunities to support us practicing and growing in this area. We are developing technical design resources to support this aspect of the work. And we have our design managers who, for lack of a better term, because we've tried them all, are those translators who kind of really help us work through that integrated process, understanding the values of both stages. So as I said, strategic focus, the first thing. We have our areas of focus. They're all pretty interdependent and enabling each other. Design management specifically is to actively look at how it changes our outcomes further down the line. Technical design services. While we have engineers and architects on staff, it's not that we're not talking about vertical integration, but our first step in this whole idea of scaling is focus on that gap. Focus on really having that expertise and awareness about how to sit in between the worlds. Take GPLA as an example. When we start on a project, instead of just the sort of typical peer review, we'll go out with the supers and the construction team and really think, okay, look at temporary shoring. Can we make that permanent? Do we really have to do it that way? If we tweak the design a little bit, can we save hassle, performance, et cetera, on the back end? It's a little bit sort of putting your fingers in the dam versus building a better dam versus maybe not even building a dam and just repathing the river and kind of really thinking about things differently. And right back to the beginning, the earlier you think about that, The earlier you have those conversations, the more integrated it is into your approach. And then design management is really just, again, understanding all these things are connected, and when you turn one dial, it affects another dial, and somebody kind of has to be on the lookout for that. That it's not just coordination, it's really aligning systems thinking. It's really understanding how pushing in here pushes out there, and the interdependency of the systems we build. Process. So if you look at these shapes, do they look the same at all? They don't, but they all have key similarities. In the equilateral, all those sides are the same length. They're all the same panel. The difference is the joint condition. In the equiangular, the angle joints are all exactly the same. The only difference is the distance between them. When we think about standardization in construction, we tend to think about it, even people who are really passionate about it, tend to think about it at one level, but it's a multi-level thing. It's not just this detail is the same as it will be next time. It could be this whole system is the same that it will be next time, but the interface will be different. It can be huge areas of similarity if we just change the lens through which we look at that similarity. Design for manufacture and assembly, of course. Again, not a concept I think any of you are unaware of, but it really is a different design process. It really is spending time iterating, thinking about what it means to make something and then to assemble something. And what we do in a typical project now is all conflated together. If you thought of building a building more like an IKEA project, where you manufacture all the pieces in a controlled environment, everything is repetitive and standardized, and all you had to do on site was screw the pieces together, the whole experience would be different. And then the problems we encounter would be handled differently because the interfaces, again, would be different. So all of that being said, where we really started to think about this was frameworks. We can't take an industry that's full of complete flexibility. Every person right now typically has the opportunity to apply their own thinking, their own approach, their own way of doing things. It's not that we don't have authorities having jurisdiction, but there is a lot of latitude in how you get from A to B. And how do we maintain the experience, the creativity, the positive aspects of that, and still achieve some predictability and consistency? So at the moment, we're leaning into frameworks where we establish, in effect, the guardrails, the basic structure of these are the points you must hit. And everybody must hit these points, and you must hit them in this particular way. But a lot of the space in between is still yours to play in. We started looking at how do the pieces come together? So again, we can focus on communication, passing information. When do we hand off information that actually doesn't need to be handed off? It could just be the same piece of information. If we set the goals and objectives for that up front, as opposed to setting the goals and objectives for just the next step, then we can think again about more holistic approach to the process. And then, again, right now our ability, we've all talked about data today. What we can do with that, I think as an industry has struggled because we don't see another one like it to apply those lessons to. As we start to think about this differently, we're starting to change the way that data comes back and informs our lessons learned. We're creating the value proposition for really maybe nerding out over that detail a little bit longer, because then for the next 5 years, we don't have to think about it again. Part of that, obviously, is tools, approaches. Technology allows us to do things now, obviously, that are much easier than they were. But it's not the magic pill. Most of the things we can do, we could do when I started practice 25 plus years ago. They're faster and better now, but they're not, for the most part, radically different. This is a culture problem. This is an ideology problem. The way that we move things forward is about changing our thinking. Nonetheless, we do need to lean into tools, and one of the ways we can help deliver consistency is in those tools. But part of the reason you see a number of tools on that board as facilitation, communication, collaboration is because it helps us speak to that culture piece. It helps us create a forum to have that value proposition. So instead of me just telling Joe, I know you've done it the same way for 20 years, this time I want you to do it differently, we can really get everybody aligned on why we're doing it differently and the win for everybody else in that process. So we're leaning in a little bit on those softer tools. Education is a big component of that. Training our teams to think about things differently, to have that experience of other perspectives. And I wasn't really thinking of it this way, but randomly at lunch, sort of having a conversation, realized that although we've done it, we haven't necessarily done it thoughtfully. Where we're trying to move the whole organization, we're moving in baby steps. We're setting a better baseline. We're educating very broadly, but not with a 20-year vision. We're like, how could your job be a little bit easier, a little bit smoother next month? And really thinking about things that almost everybody can wrap their head around. And then there's a part of us kind of thinking about it this way. We're like, okay, what is it going to look like in 20 years? Everything is completely different, to make sure that those two journeys are communicating with each other and that those baby steps we're taking are getting us to our ultimate destination. And our education platform is a big part of that. Again, it also helps with some of the practical things we've talked about today, aligned terminology, the structure of our data sets, common language, those sorts of things. We've recently had a corporate debate about the use of the word standards. And what does it really mean? And what do we really mean when we tell somebody that's a standard? Does it mean you're going to be in trouble and you're not going to have your job tomorrow if you don't do it? Does it mean it's our favorite way to do it? Does it mean we are harvesting reportable data from this? And so that kind of language alignment seems very simple. I mean, it's a very commonly understood word. We spent months debating it because that nuance, the implicit definition that comes along with your use, is part of that cultural piece. So what's next? Practice. We're taking all of these ideas, we've put these groups in place, we have handfuls of successes you've seen from some of our highlights along the way. We're just trying to repeat them and harvest that data, really put that flywheel in place so that we can see, we can take, to use the earlier clarification, and really make this theory instead of just hypothesis. Right now it's a hypothesis. We think we know what will improve if we do this. We don't have enough evidence to really say it's a theory yet, and we want to get to that place. And we want to do it with consistent and aligned approaches and information that support that. So that's where we are. Thank you very much.